Happy birthday, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I spent it driving back from Sacramento
I heard the story.
8 hours driving.
And then back.
And then back the next day.
Well, let's give a couple shout outs really quick to the people also who drive and listen to the podcast. And that's one, Matt Benjamin. And Matthew, I know you're out there. I know you're probably listening in your car right now. We appreciate you listening to the show, watching the show. Such good things to say about it, too. So
it was morning, everyone.
And Helen and Gary Boggs, they listen to the podcast while they're doing their jigsaw puzzles.
Well, good.
So we give them something to learn while they're having their fun. They love their jigsaw puzzles. We see Helen put them out all the time, so it's really nice to get those compliments, too. Big fan.
I think very highly of all of these people. They're precious souls.
Okay.
Identity theft.
Identity theft. This is going to make a great title for the video. I think I got a feeling we're going to get another bunch of cross-branded watchers here.
Well, I wrote this back in 2005, but it's very apropos our life today.
Okay.
It's interesting. Yesterday, I was reading a Consumer Report, the latest. I get it in the mail, and it had a big section on identity theft. It says, your anti-scam guide is what they have for us. I've been scammed, but
I think we all have, but they're pretty clever.
6-7 years ago, somebody commandeered my computer while I was on it and claimed if I did not do something, they would erase everything. And so I got hit for a couple of $1,000. And thank God nothing has happened since then. So identity theft in that regard is very real. It's the fastest growing crime in America, I understand.
Oh, wow.
And hardly a day passes without stories of some sort in this regard coming out of the paper, etc.
That's funny. I couldn't get through the whole movie, but there's a movie called The Beekeeper. It's about an ex, Jason Statham, I believe, but popular action actor, and the Cosby wife, Felicia Rashad, was the one that got scammed. And she lost not only her money, but the church's money, $2 million. And that was the whole basis of the movie, that he went to go get her money back. So this is obviously a very popular topic.
Well, it is, and it's touching us all one way or the other. And the term identity itself is under attack. How do I develop identity? I have the 4 W's. Who am I? This is not in the article.
Okay. Thank you.
Who am I? Why am I? How am I? And where am I? I should add a 5th, and when am I?
When am I?
When? This is outside our article today, but I kept thinking, those are the questions we all have about ourselves.
Correct.
And when am I? When do I develop my identity? When I was a teenager, when I was a child, adolescent, young adult, or when? So this question has come into focus in the midst of the crises we've been having. Today's paper, I just picked it up and brought it with me.
Okay, LA Times.
LA Times, a young man by Alex, I won't give the last name. Blaze took his home, but this isn't the first time I've had nothing, he said. After being homeless at 18, a former foster youth found a haven with family in Altadena. And then lost it. So he's now again out wondering what's next. What happens to identity when you lose everything?
Well, I've lost everything once in my life.
You have?
Yes. And I can tell you that I was in depression for 20 years because of it. So when you lose everything, especially when you're young,
Yeah.
it can really take a lot of time to come back.
And this is...
And that's if you have somewhere to go back to. When you're young, you
Yeah.
usually haven't established your identity yet.
And this is why the question, how am I? What develops my identity? How do I develop an identity?
Probably why people have identity crises.
Okay, and an identity which is a good one. You can develop a negative identity and a destructive identity, which is not helpful. Or you can help get involved with influences in your life that are positive. They'll help you develop a positive identity. And an identity that's not dependent, I can say this easy enough, on the material things that you have. Now, these fires, as horrible as they are, and by the way, I know people who lost houses in these fires. The former minister of our church at TPC lost her house in Altadena.
Wow.
She had just moved there. Samira has a friend who's getting married next month. Her fiancé lost a multi-million-dollar home in Altadena.
Wow.
The doctor. He was away. He wasn't home. And his daughter in New York on TV read about it and Googled it and said, Dad, your house is burning. How would you like to hear it that way?
Well, I have noticed lately, including my own mother who's checked the insurance on our house,
Yeah.
To see if we have fire insurance. There's a lot of people that did not have fire insurance on their house. They're just out.
Yeah.
Now, true, the house is probably 15% of the land value. You still got the land to sell. You still own the land. That's probably the most important part. But losing all your personal, I mean, the coach of the Lakers lost his house, the house he was in.
And what does that to do identity? A coach has built a very strong identity.
True.
And a strong bank account too, I'm sure.
True. That's an easy rebuild.
Which helps.
And he was renting. Let's be clear.
He was okay. He was new.
He was renting.
He was new.
He lost all his personal property, but
Yeah.
you're right. He has an identity he can recover quite
He
quickly.
lacked out. So all these stories pile up, and my heart goes out to these people. Here's a man with a picture of his mattress, with the springs. That's all that's left, and charred remains of his bed.
And the smell, by the way, is the worst part of the fire.
And what's to me amazing, next to it is an article, "Don't send fire debris to our park," cities say. Duarte, Azusa, Irwindale, and Baldwin Park oppose EPA's plan for nearby site where they're going to take the rubble. They're going to take it somewhere. You can't dump it in the sea. Then the environmentalists will...
George Carlin, God rest his soul, one of the funniest and smartest comedians I ever listened to, had an anagram called NIMBY.
Yeah, not in my
Not
backyard.
in my backyard.
Yeah.
You remember that too.
Oh, sure.
And that's kind of what we're seeing here. And I think it's very interesting that article is right next to, Amber Alert.
Okay, somebody got kidnapped.
Well, like I was taught to, we pray for a moment, not only for the child, but also for the person taking them to come to clarity, and for the people who've lost the children to be reunited with them as soon as possible.
God help them. God help the parents if they're around. And then there's another article, same page. There's such a thing as too fast with fire cleanup.
Yes, there is.
And then there's another article on the same page. Mayor, recovery chief pledge a revived Pacific Palisades. They are pledging support. So, and another article, that's the LA Times for you. I love LA Times, by the way. I read it
I
every
can
day.
tell. I remember when you were preaching, you had one with you as well, and everybody paid attention.
And I said, I'm probably the only one in Tustin who still receives the mail.
Yeah, because you said, I think you called it like the Daily Magazine or something, and I was like, what is that?
And here's another article, same page, front page. This is the California section. President Trump on Monday heightened his battle with California over water policy by claiming that the military just entered the great state of California and under emergency powers turned on the water flowing abundantly from the Pacific Northwest and beyond in a post on his social media, Truth Social. I don't think it's Truth, I think it's social. But he's making political hay out of it, which is a politician for you.
Yep.
So all these stories on identity on the front page of LA Times California section. Wow. I think that's unbelievable.
You know, the editor would probably be very interested to find that the combination of articles has kind of an interesting organization to it.
The organization.
And you know that's his job, so I'm almost willing to bet he did it on purpose.
Well, of course. They do. They know what they're doing. So identity theft is what can steal your identity. That's, to me, we think of bank accounts and checks and credit cards. To me, that's secondary. The primary is, where does your identity lodge?
Good word.
Jesus talked about that.
Okay.
And I'm going to introduce him. So there's the paper, the book, and the
Bible, and the Holy Bible.
Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. I used to quote it the other way. Where your heart is, there is your treasure. They say, where your treasure is, there's your heart. So our identity is built upon where is the primary lodging place of who you are, your treasure, what you call your treasure. I find this fascinating because it's coming closer and closer to us, to our homes. And I look at my house and I say, I could lose my house next week. You never know. Then what do I do? Where is my treasure? How?
So you're saying your identity could be wrapped up in your daily activities.
Well, activities, relationships. Again, we come to relationships. I find that a key word for abundant living is relationships. And one thing that's so horrible about old age, and I'm facing it finally, is the shrinking of the number of people to whom you turn to for help and for activity in maintaining your identity. It's shrinking. In my family, I'm the last one left, and I'm 94.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
You're 93 the last episode, so.
Yeah, I grew up by a whole year. Family is very important to me. On my way up to Sacramento, stopped by and laid some flowers at my parents' gravesite. They're there because I believe in maintaining family ties with my parents. I helped them come to America and all that.
Okay.
Interesting, 6 months ago, I read an article in one of our local papers that said vandals had set fire to cypress trees in that cemetery in Fresno called Masis, which is another name for Ararat Mountain.
Okay.
And I had no idea where they were. I went there now. I found out they were just 10 feet away from our parents are buried. They had planted new trees. There were 10-foot tall new cypress trees. I knew they were the ones that had been replaced.
Okay.
And burned. So it's getting close to me. Not only vandals, but the animosity that tears people apart, that tries to destroy identity, is very much real today. Genocide, the worst thing a genocide does, it tries to tear you away from your identity.
It's interesting how that's evolved. Such a horrible thing, and it's actually evolved.
Yeah. This is why, to me, it tore my heart out to see 200,000 refugees trying to return to northern Gaza, where there's nothing but rubble. No water, no electricity, no food. It's rubble, but they're going back. It's their identity. They want to maintain an identity.
Well, then obviously identity counts for a lot.
Well, sure it does. And identity theft is a horrible thing when people work at not your physical, but your emotional and spiritual personality. It's like finding out that you had an esteemed parent who had died long ago, when let's say grandfather, about whom you had some very wonderful stories. And then you find out they were all fiction. They never happened that way. But he was a former bank robber. What does that do to your identity?
Well, that's something I'm going to have to take some time on to give you a correct answer.
Well, think about it. Now, I am a child of my heritage.
Okay.
My parents and their community or their village, quote unquote, raised me up to be who I am. The same is true for you and your identity as well. If your village had a vibrant and active church, as mine did, then you have been fortunate to have had the center of your identity development, spiritual forces drawing from the person of Christ, meaning and values more precious than any bank account. Now, I've always said this. You don't just go to church, you are the church, you are the people. You are part of a village. And what happens to that village happens to you. You're part and parcel. And there are many in America today who are listening to me who have no villages. They have no community. When you first started out, you asked me, why do you want these podcasts? I said, I want to reach people who really don't understand what it means to have Christ in your life. We're not talking about church. We're talking about how God touches us, gets involved in our lives, and shapes us. That's, to me, the meaning of Christ. And I follow the teachings of Jesus, not to read stories, but to listen to what are the principles for life development that he's talking about. Over here in this statement that he made, he says, don't depend on your bank account. You know, it's interesting. I've got a few savings, but I find myself being drawn every day to the report. What happened to the stock market yesterday? I went up or down. If you don't, I remember in Fresno when I was a pastor, some of the elderly.
Fresno?
In Fresno.
Ooh.
I had some of the rich retired farmers.
Oh, okay.
The first thing they did, they went down to a hotel in Fresno where there was the stockbrokers' offices, and they had the ticker tape.
Oh, okay.
They used to sit there and watch all day the ticker tape.
Wow.
That was their life.
Wow.
I remember then thinking, what kind of life is this? Because I had no bank account. My dad never had a bank account.
Oh, when your money makes money, you're considered high class.
And it controls you.
Yeah.
And that's what Jesus is talking about.
Oh, okay.
Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
Mm.
So
okay.
We engineer our policies so that our savings or our treasures will not be touched. This is what's so horrible about politics in America today. I read the other day that the oligarchs are beginning to run this government in this country, in America.
Mm.
Now, we're not in Russia, where the oligarchs, that's where the term came from, but now we're in America. And they're beginning to run our life. Okay? So what's happened to teachings of Jesus? In the meantime, they confess to be good Christians.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes. There's a lot of, well, you can stand up and say anything you want, but if you actually are something, there's a difference.
And what's more horrible is so many churches are supporting this kind of policy in America. So where we're headed, I'm very, very disturbed and very, what's the word, doubtful about the health of our country.
Yes.
Because this is what our identity is being shaped by our money. And our money is running our politics. And politics is self-serving.
Yes, it is. I think that's fantastic bumper sticker right there. / hashtag. Politics is self-serving. Self-serving never, I don't think I've ever heard of anything good come out after self-serving.
The former chief of staff of our armed forces, his security detail has been withdrawn by our present government to expose it because he could not get along with the guy. So now these are security, the chief, head of staff of all the...
Leaving him wide out in the open.
All right. So I don't want to belabor this point, but identity must be from within developed by what I call Christ forces. Not Christ, a fictitious figure that we have in my brain or a fantasy about which I love Jesus, but the Christ who comes through in his teachings. And in his teachings here, and he was a prime example of what he's talking about. He did not
understood about moths. When he said moths, that was a term I was like, I get it.
You've had moth-eaten
I've had
clothes?
Moth-eaten stuff. And it's horrible. When you lose your favorite sweater, you lose your favorite jacket.
Yeah, you open it up, oh no.
Or your Christmas decoration or whatever it was. And it's much more holy. We'll say holy.
And in the old days, we used to have mothballs that smelled like crazy. So you had a choice, either have holes in your sweater
or smelly.
Smell of mothballs. Quite a choice, isn't it?
This is a great metaphor for what we're talking about today.
Exactly.
The mothballs / politics. Do you really do you want it to smell or do you want it to have holes in it?
Now, I don't want to lose my identity.
Nobody does.
But I say, God, help me to first develop an inner identity that cannot be touched by moths and thieves. How can that be? Help me, and help me to rub shoulders and hearts with people who know and want the same thing. And the village I'm talking about doesn't have to be the church.
Okay.
People who don't have churches have villages nevertheless, have group of people.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, a group of people surrounding them in which they form a part.
A bond, yes.
And they contribute as much.
You know, what's funny is in a negative aspect of social media, which I usually don't bring up negative aspects, but a lot of people will turn to their social family, which they don't even talk. Mm-hmm. It's just the people they follow that they believe to be. So now all of a sudden a village can be digital. So you're right. Without a church, you find your own village.
But if it's just digital, you know how far you can go with digital.
That's true.
We're looking for a new toaster oven. Samira says, I don't want digital. I want manual. For our washer dryer machines, we paid $500 for the cheapest.
Oh, that's great.
From Sears.
They just have a couple turning dials.
And we've had it for over 10 years. Instead of paying $2,000 and showing to your friends who come, oh, look what I got. But I don't know how it works.
My mother, when I got divorced, my mother moved down here to take care of me and the baby. And she says, I want to move into a brand new apartment. Let's just, everything brand new. And in addition to the smell of the glue that was drying, that took months, she could not operate a single thing. Not the dishwasher, not the heater, not the air conditioner, nothing. Yeah. We operated nothing with ease. And I go, well, that's new. And so we left. After 4 months, she bought a house and was, no, we're out. Well, and so I understand that reference very much.
That's the age in which we live in. They want something to look great,
but not work.
Behind the scenes, they have problems with it, but they don't dare tell you about it.
Sounds like when they brought out the Model T, right? It was on fire in the back, but in the front, they had polished it up and made it look great.
Wow. Now, how do we rob ourselves and our children of their spiritual identity? We do so, first of all, I've noticed this in church.
So how do we rob our children of their spiritual identity?
I'm talking of parents now. By not taking seriously our own spiritual education. Hit and miss attendance at church. I used to say the clue to the drop out kid is a drop off kid. You drop off at church and go home, have your tea, watch the game, and come back in time to pick him up from Sunday school. It used to be, now we don't have here at TPC Sunday school, but I used to have a Sunday school.
Okay.
Well, 40, 50 children, the parents would not stay for church. They used to go home, come back, and pick their kids up. Well, what are they teaching their kids? That when they grow up, they don't have to go to church. That's what they're teaching. I used to say to myself, I can't wait to grow up so I don't have to go to church.
Oh, wow.
I remember that until I was so-called born again.
There's a lot of movies that depict people balancing their checkbooks.
Yeah.
You know, filing their nails, snapping.
Yeah.
The church is always a drag.
Yeah, it is. Now, these are only some ways we allow precious inner identity of Christian character to be stolen from us. And we do the stealing ourselves.
Exclamation point.
The loss of that treasure is irreplaceable. Jesus said, what shall it profit a man, a woman, a person, if he were to gain the whole world but lose his soul? This is right in this chapter 6, where he talks about wealth.
It's interesting. It's from the book of Matthew. Because Matthew was the name of the guy who played Chandler in Friends, and he had the exact same problem. They went out because he died very very young in a hot tub, and he's one of the most popular characters in the history of television. And they asked, before he died, they asked him what was going on, and he said, I wanted to be famous. I wanted to make money. I wanted the world to know my name. And I got it all, and I lost myself.
Yeah.
And now what do I have? And this echoes it completely.
This is it. And I pray that I'll be part of a scene, a people who help build identity and not tear down. It's easy to tear down.
Okay.
Politicians do that. They tear down.
It's also something we've been talking about, you and I personally, before the show, building yourself up.
That's right. And you do that by saying, what do I need to grow, not what do I do to help them grow, to be like me. That's wrong. So that's it for today. That's
me in a nutshell.
Okay.
That's a lesson I'm looking forward to learning. Fantastic. So LA Times, the Bible, and Pointed Reflections, all in one, and great coffee.
And great coffee.
Thank you, Keen, for Keen Coffee and being so close.